But persistent as she was, in verse 11, one day, Joseph's just doing his job, and conveniently and probably, and she made sure that nobody was around and had the whole thing staged. And it says she caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." And whatever you can think in your mind this morning, however seductive, that you can picture this, erotic or whatever this moment is, you have to, because I believe it's a triple X moment. And verse 12 says, he ran out of the house. This is the moment you have to run without hesitation. I was teaching this lesson one time to a bunch of kids at church camp. Yeah, that's tough. Teenagers, and I had a great bunch of boys in there. And after class, they came up and they said, "Man, we maybe make a song out of this." This was that moment where you go, take the garments and run. But that's what they said. You got to run for your life. From a play written in 1697, we learn the old phrase that hell hath no fury like a woman's scorn. And the lust that drove this woman now turns into rage, with trumped up accusations of rape. And what you see here is evidence of somebody who lacks character. It's evident in the fact that she cared nothing about the sacredness of her marriage, and then she begins to develop these false accusations about a man that her husband trusted, a man of strong moral character. She can't even keep her story straight between verses 13 and 17. And comes up with these trumped up charges. And the reason his cloak is there laying on the bed is because he'd taken his clothes off, getting ready to rape her. And then she blames her husband for bringing this slave in to sexually harass her. And as time comes in and comes around, verses 19 and 20 says, when her master heard the story of his wife, that she told him, "This is how your slave treated me," he says that he burned with anger. Now what you have to remember is, what's Potiphar's position here? He's what? He's the head of the executioners. He burns with anger. Joseph's master, notice what happens. Joseph's master took and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And the more, again, as this story unfolds, and I look at it over and over again, I find it more interesting, because if you believed that if you really believed that a slave attempted to rape your wife, do you think you'd simply put the guy in prison? If you were the captain of the executioners? Could it be that Potiphar was so angry? What he was so angry about was he was losing his best servant due to his wife. He knew that his wife was unfaithful to him. We pick up at verse 20. While Joseph was there in prison, notice what happens. This man of character, the Lord was with him. And he showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. And so the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. And the warden paid no attention, again, to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success. And whatever he did, see, even at this point, here's a man of character. It's obvious that even in the providence of God, wherever God took him, Joseph hadn't got to the point where we understand the book of Genesis, where he says, whatever you intended for evil, God intended for good. He hadn't got there yet. But he still had to trust God. See, being a person of character has to be a person of character consistently. Charles Swindoll says the greatest character trait that you can provide your spouse and your family is moral and ethical self-control. And when you think about where Joseph found himself in this situation, what are those well-planned steps leading up to the hurdles of temptation and test and lust that will determine how you're going to clear the hurdle and how your overall performance in the race is going to be? Well, first of all, you have to determine to be a person of integrity. It's not important what just people think you are, but it's important what you really are. You have to determine your response long before you ever get to that hurdle. You can't look for reasons to justify participating. You have to have the same attitude that Joseph had when he said in verse 9, "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" James reminds us in the New Testament in chapter 4, verse 17, "When you know the good things that you should do and you don't do them, you sin." But he also gives us some insight in that same chapter in verses 7 and 8. He says, "Submit yourselves then to God." Get this in order. "Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you." You got to get that all in the right order. You have to boldly refuse flirtatious, tempting situations. Don't put yourself in compromising situations. Don't linger there. But here's the one thing that I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. Don't ever forget it. That short-term thinking has long-term consequences. Because the price of immediate and instant gratification is usually more than most people want to pay. It'll have a long-term price tag on your family, your health, your emotional health. Financially, it can ruin a lot of people and ruin your relationships with lots of friends. I would tell you today, there is no easy payment plan for the price of immediate and instant gratification. You may be the only person not doing it, but be that one person. So the question of the day is this: what is it that's going on in your life today that you hope nobody ever finds out about? And if there is something like that, I would just encourage you that it needs to stop. Because even though somebody else, I think nobody knows, there's always one who does. There's nothing you can hide from Him. And maybe you've done it your way long enough that you've come to the point that you're ready to try it God's way. Maybe you've come here this morning looking for hope and forgiveness and grace and healing as a result of some of the poor choices that you've made in the past. You say, "I'm ready to turn and walk a new direction in life." And so the invitation then is, we want you to join the journey of becoming a devoted follower of Jesus Christ. We want to be here today, in the days to come, to help you with those important steps.